This is Judges chapter 6. After Deborah, the land had rest 40 years, Joshua 5:31. So as we come to chapter 6, adding up all the years in Judges, it's been at least 206 years since Joshua passed away. The year is now about 1170 BC. After Deborah, here's what happened. Verse 1. The children of Israel did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight. Comment, they did evil. As a result, still in verse 1, Yahweh delivered them into the hand of Midian 7 years. Comment, Midian or the Midianites are desert dwellers descended from Abraham and his final wife Keturah. When Midian and his brothers had grown up, Abraham, quote, sent them away from Isaac his son eastward to the east country, Genesis 25:6. Abraham did so for their own good. Yahweh was promising Canaan to Isaac's descendants, and his other sons would therefore have no inheritance in Canaan, no future in Canaan, so he sent them east. But now it's Yahweh himself who has drawn Midian's descendants out of the eastern desert to ravage Isaac's descendants Israel. Verse 2. The hand of Midian prevailed against Israel, and because of Midian the children of Israel made themselves the dens which are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. Comment, the Israelites have to hide themselves and their food stores from Midian. Verse 6. So it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the children of the east came up against them. They encamped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth until you come to Gaza. They left no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep, ox, or donkey. For they came up with their livestock and their tents. They came in as locusts for multitude. Both they and their camels were without number, and they had come into the land to destroy it. Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the children of Israel cried to Yahweh. Comment, Yahweh warned Israel long ago that this would happen whenever they forsake him. He said in Leviticus 26:16, quote, you will sow your seed in vain, for your enemies will eat it, end quote. Now, as it says in verse 3, quote, when Israel had sown, the Midianites and Amalekites came up against them. In other words, at harvest time, the Midianites and Amalekites were coming in to steal the harvest. And also long ago, Yahweh warned Israel in Deuteronomy 28:31, your ox, your donkey, and your sheep will be given to your enemies. And now in verse 4, there is, quote, left no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep, ox, or donkey, end quote. And also long ago, Yahweh warned Israel, Deuteronomy 28:43, quote, the foreigner will mount up above you higher and higher, and you will come down lower and lower, end quote. Now in verse 6, quote, Israel was brought very low because of Midian, end quote. This is all ancient history to the Israelites alive right now, about 206 years after the death of Joshua, but Yahweh's word is timeless. In verse 6, quote, the children of Israel cried to Yahweh. Verse 7, when the children of Israel cried to Yahweh because of Midian, Yahweh sent a prophet to the children of Israel. Comment, Yahweh sent a prophet, but we don't know his name. Still in verse 6, the prophet said to them, Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out from before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am Yahweh your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But you have not listened to my voice. Comment, the first and foremost problem, once again, is that Israel is violating the first commandment. Quote, you shall have no other gods before me. Deuteronomy 20, verse 3. There's no indication that the people repented, but some at least are groaning to Yahweh. And verse 11, Yahweh's angel came and sat under the oak which is in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. His son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Comment, that was a lot of information. In the territory of Manasseh, in the locality of Ophrah, there lived a man named Joash and his son Gideon. They were descended from Abiezer, a Manassite. Joash the father, Gideon the son. In the New Testament, Gideon earned an honorable mention in the Hebrews Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11:32. We'll soon find out why. In verse 11, Gideon was in the process of beating the grain off wheat stalks, hiding the grain in a winepress, when lo and behold, Yahweh's angel came and sat under an oak apparently within sight. He's here in response to Israel's groaning. Verse 12. Yahweh's angel appeared to him and said to him, Yahweh is with you, you mighty man of valor. Comment. The angel calls Gideon a mighty man of valor. This is more prophecy than history because Gideon has done nothing yet. Yahweh's angel knows more about Gideon than Gideon knows about himself. Gideon doesn't consider himself to be a mighty man of valor as we go to verse 13. Gideon said to him, O my Lord, if Yahweh is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Where are all his wondrous works which our fathers told us of, saying, Didn't Yahweh bring us up from Egypt? But now Yahweh has cast us off and delivered us into the hand of Midian. Comment. As we'll find out in a moment, to Gideon, the person under the tree looks like an ordinary man. Gideon's obviously not impressed with his appearance. Both the man and Gideon are speaking about Yahweh as if Yahweh weren't present. Gideon assumes the man doesn't know what he's talking about. How many of us have heard a true message from an ordinary man about God's desire to do great things, but we thought it was unrealistic? Gideon says, Bah, humbug, if Yahweh's with us, why has all this happened to us? He doesn't know what Moses said, and he doesn't hear or believe the prophet who just spoke a moment ago, or he would know that Yahweh has most definitely not forsaken Israel. Israel has forsaken Yahweh. In fact, the Midianites are evidence of Yahweh. They're a fulfillment of what Yahweh said he would do when Israel forsakes him. They're a confirmation of Yahweh, not an argument against him. Whenever you or I feel as if God has forsaken us, we might consider 2 Chronicles 16:9, quote, The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his, end quote. So let's give our hearts 100% to the Lord and see what he'll do with our problems. Now coming up, here's the angel of Yahweh's answer to Gideon's pessimistic assessment. Verse 14. Yahweh looked at him. Comment. The man under the tree who is the angel of Yahweh seems to be Yahweh himself in the form of a man because it says Yahweh looked at him. He must be thinking as he's looking something to the effect, why won't they ever listen to me? It wouldn't be the first time Yahweh has appeared in the form of a man. He clearly appeared that way to Abraham and to Jacob, for example, Genesis 18:22 and 32:30. But Gideon is still in the dark about the identity of this person. Going on with verse 14, Yahweh said to Gideon, Go in this your might, and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Haven't I sent you? He said to him, O Lord, how shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. Yahweh said to him, Surely I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. Comment. This is the same attitude Moses had when Yahweh called him at the burning bush. Moses said, quote, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Exodus 3:11. But after God came to Moses, we knew it would be no problem for Moses to go to Pharaoh. And now that God has come to Gideon, we know it should be no problem for Gideon to strike Midian, even though he's only one man, as he said. But we're not so sure about it when it comes to our own predicaments. If God commands us to do something, he will make it happen. The Christian life is not too hard for us. Whatever God has commanded us, he will be there to accomplish through us. There is no situation too hopeless, no addiction too strong, no commandment too difficult. Verses 14 and 15 say, Haven't I commanded you? Surely I will be with you. If he commands, he is with. Somebody said 90% of life is just showing up. Back in the days of Joshua, all Israel had to do was show up on the battlefield, run at the enemy, and the enemy ran 7 ways, Deuteronomy 28:7. Coming up, Gideon's starting to get an idea of what's going on, but he wants confirmation. Verse 17. He said to him, If now I have found favor in your sight, then show me a sign that it is you who talk with me. Please don't go away until I come to you and bring out my present and lay it before you. He said, I will wait until you come back. Comment. The angel of the Lord is waiting. Verse 19. Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes of an ephah of meal. He put the meat in a basket, and he put the broth in a pot, and brought it out to him under the oak and presented it. The angel of God said to him, Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. He did so. Then Yahweh's angel stretched out the end of the staff that was in his hand. Comment, this person has a staff and he's holding it in his hand, meaning he's in human form. But back in verse 16, he's identified as Yahweh. He stretched out the staff in his hand and, going on, touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire went up out of the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. Then Yahweh's angel departed out of his sight. Gideon saw that he was Yahweh's angel, and Gideon said, "Alas, Lord Yahweh, because I have seen Yahweh's angel face to face." Comment, because of the fear factor, it's difficult to impossible for God to speak to us in a glorified form, Exodus 20:19. That's why he came to us in the form of Jesus, Deuteronomy 18:15 and 16. Jesus had no stately form or majesty or unusual appearance, Isaiah 53:2. He was ordinary appearing, the same way he appeared to Gideon. Now that Gideon knows who that man was, he's no longer dismissing him as a stranger that doesn't know what he's talking about. He says, "Alas, Lord Yahweh, I've seen Yahweh's angel face to face." He said alas because he thinks it'll be the death of him. This is the usual panicky response when anyone in the Scripture sees a representation of God. Verse 23, Yahweh said to him, "Peace be to you. Don't be afraid, you shall not die." Then Gideon built an altar there to Yahweh and called it, "Yahweh is Peace." Comment, after seeing Yahweh and being scared out of his mind, Gideon's just thankful that he survived the encounter, that Yahweh said, "You shall not die." He called the name of the altar, "Yahweh is Peace." That's what we need before we see God face to face. We need for him to extend his peace to us, or the encounter with God will be fatal. Romans 5:1, quote, "Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ," end quote. We will see God, and we need to have peace with him before that encounter. Going on about that altar that Gideon built, still in verse 24, "To this day it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That same night Yahweh said to him, Take your father's bull, even the second bull, 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is by it. Then build an altar to Yahweh your God on the top of this stronghold in an orderly way, and take the second bull, and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah which you shall cut down." Then Gideon took men of his servants, and did as Yahweh had spoken to him. Because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, he could not do it by day, but he did it by night. Comment, God commanded Gideon to break down the local altar to Baal and the idol to Asherah that was next to it, and replace them with an altar to Yahweh. But he couldn't do it openly because of his idol-worshiping Israelite neighbors and relatives. This is what Gideon was up against, not just the Midianites, but his own wayward people and his own family. We have to appreciate the heroism here. At Yahweh's command, Gideon offered his father's second bull on the new altar to Yahweh. The text doesn't explain what Yahweh's second bull was or why it was called the second. There was never anything said about a first bull. Verse 28, "When the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah was cut down that was by it, and the second bull was offered on the altar that was built. They said to one another, Who has done this thing? When they inquired and they asked, they said, Gideon the son of Joash has done this thing. Then the men of the city said to Joash, Bring out your son that he may die, because he has broken down the altar of Baal, and because he has cut down the Asherah that was by it." Comment, Yahweh said many times in the law of Moses that Israel should demolish all the altars of foreign gods and idols, Numbers 33:52. But Israel has sunk so low as to threaten the person who does the demolishing with death. Now Gideon's father Joash will give an epic response to this godless mob. Verse 31, "Joash said to all who stood against him, Will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? He who will contend for him, let him be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because someone has broken down his altar." Comment, Joash says, "Let not those who contend for Yahweh be put to death. Let those who contend for Baal be put to death." That's standing up for the right thing at the right time. Proverbs 15:23, quote, "A man has joy in an apt answer, and how delightful is a timely word," end quote. Gideon has made his father so proud he's going to start to call Gideon by a new nickname. Verse 32, "Therefore on that day he named him Jerubbaal, saying, Let Baal contend against him, because he has broken down his altar." Comment, Jerubbaal means let Baal contend. It's a mockery of Baal and a statement of pride in Gideon. It basically means I'm inviting Baal to harm my son if he can. The nameless prophet in verse 10 quoted Yahweh saying, "You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites," and Joash is doing just that, not fearing Baal whatsoever. Now we switch scenes totally to what Midian and Amalek are doing. Verse 33, "Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east assembled themselves together, and they passed over and encamped in the valley of Jezreel." Comment, they've come in again like a swarm of locusts. They're getting ready to gather more plunder. Verse 34, "But Yahweh's Spirit came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and Abiezer was gathered together to follow him." Comment, the people in Gideon's locale are mostly related. They're descended from the one man Abiezer. They're rallying to Gideon's trumpet call. Verse 35, "He sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they also were gathered together to follow him. He sent messengers to Asher and to Zebulun and to Naphtali, and they came up to meet them." Comment, Yahweh commanded the smashing of the altar and idols, which was just the right thing to inspire Israel. There are now a number of men who want to stand up for Yahweh. Gideon saw the angel of the Lord consume that offering with the touch of his staff, but coming up, he wants more confirmation. He's going to put out his famous fleece. Verse 36, "Gideon said to God, If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken, behold, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece only, and it is dry on all the ground, then I'll know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have spoken." It was so, for he rose up early on the next day and pressed the fleece together and wrung the dew out of the fleece, a bowlful of water. Gideon said to God, "Don't let your anger be kindled against me, and I will speak but this once. Please let me make a trial just this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry only on the fleece, and on all the ground let there be dew." God did so that night, for it was dry on the fleece only, and there was dew on all the ground. Comment, this is where we get the term putting out a fleece. It's shorthand for asking God to perform some sign of confirmation. Yahweh went along with it in this case. That's the chapter. Judges 7 is next at landofhavilah.net. Judges 7, Gideon's just getting started. This is the map of Judges 6. Gideon lived in the locality of Ophrah in the tribe of Manasseh, approximate location here. The Midianites and Amalekites have been coming in waves like locusts. They lived east beyond the Jordan. Right now in verse 33, Midian and Amalek are camped in the valley of Jezreel, located here. They're preparing to go on another plundering spree. However, Israelites from the tribes north and south of the valley of Jezreel have gathered around Gideon, including his home tribe of Manasseh south of the valley, and also north of the valley, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. Judges 7 is next.